He coordinates the computing education group. The research interests of Leonard include innovative pedagogical approaches, game-based learning, online teaching and learning, and computational thinking. Leonard has been actively contributed to the academic community to his research initiatives, including significant projects involving the integration of ChatGPT for mathematics teachers and business education teachers, and the implications also in computing education. I know, because Leonard is my colleague, that he has lately been involved in quite a number of PD sessions about generative AI with academics who are also at the University of Malta. So, Leonard, we thank you for being so generous to share your insights with us.
Welcome, Manuel, and thank you for inviting me. I look forward to a session where we discuss generative AI. As you said, I've been following generative AI since the launch of ChatGPT back in November of 2022, when it took the world by storm. As a member of the Faculty of Education, my real interest in ChatGPT is not just the technology and how it works, because I come from the computing area, but mostly the pedagogical implications of such a technology on people who are in the teaching and learning environment. So what I'd like to do in this session is actually go through the following agenda. I'll start off by explaining a bit what generative AI is all about. I'm assuming here that you might have used generative AI, but I'll explain how it works under the hood, because that's quite important, because through that we can understand that then what challenges it might actually have, we might actually face with this kind of technology. I then plan to offer some time for some hands-on AI prompting. I've created some test cases which we could use on business education, but you're free to adapt and change things around. You're free to ask any questions. I'll try to help as much as I can. And then in the final section, in the final section of this session, I'd like to focus a bit on the elephant in the room, which is the assessment. Basically, when ChatGPT hit the world by storm, basically one of the first things that occurred was, what will this mean for our assessment practices? So I'd like to discuss that and go in a bit into detail about what it means to have assessment in the times of generative AI, and what are the implications for traditional sort of assessment. Okay, so that's the plan. Now, obviously, I'm free to any sort of questions. Just feel free to speak out if you have any questions, or you'd like to ask something or discuss something as we go along. Manuel, if I remember correctly, we have about 70 minutes, right?
Yes, we have 75 minutes, yes.
Perfect. Okay. I'll just, okay, so that I can engage a bit my timing.
Sure.
So, AI. AI is all around us, but it's not something which is new. How can we define AI? Well, we can think of AI as a field of computer science, which looks at creating machines and software that can think and make decisions like humans. This is not something new, because it was coined, the word AI was coined back in 1956, which is quite some time ago, okay, by John McCarthy. Since then, it advanced in bursts. There were times when we were talking about AI winters, where we would have advanced in the AI field and then AI takes a step back. But lately it's been advancing a lot, especially with the advent of generative AI, which is the focus of today's PD. As I said, AI is all around us. We take for granted all the technology which involves AI, which really is part of our lives. I mean, I remember a time when I used to go abroad and I drive somewhere foreign, and I used to have to buy maps from that particular location to be able to see how I'm going to travel from one point to another. Today, I don't bother with that anymore because I just take my mobile. And from my mobile, I can use Google Maps or any sort of other mapping tool, and it shows me step by step the place I have to go through to arrive to a particular destination. Not only that, if there's traffic or there's some work which is occurring on a particular route, it generally provides me with an alternative, something which we take it for granted, but which really involves AI. Again, cameras. I might have a security camera at home, but this camera doesn't only take footage of what's happening, but it also identifies people. And when someone goes into the frame, it also identifies the emotion that that person has on his face. So it can identify if someone is sad, is happy, or he's afraid of something, you know? So all that also involves AI. And this kind of technology is pervasive. It's found everywhere. So here I need to distinguish a bit between what we consider to be AI and what is generative AI, which is the technology which is taking the world by storm since 2022, November 2022. Generative AI is considered to be AI which can generate content. Now, when we say generate content, we're talking about text, we're talking about images, so we can use generative AI to create images. We're talking about audio. We can actually have AI that mimics the human voice. We're seeing systems where you can give the system a recording of a person, and then the system actually can generate the voice according to the recording. We have generative AI that can create video based on prompts, and any media really in response to user prompts. User prompts are what guides the creation of these media, and I'll go in further detail about these prompts as we go along. Usually, in generative AI, we talk about GPTs. GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. Now, I'll explain this in a bit more detail soon. As part of generative AI, there's a special branch which is called large language models. Large language models are generative AI systems that work with the normal human language. So they're generative AI tools that communicate usually using text. And that is what I'll be focusing on in this presentation. How does this generative AI work? As with any AI model, the first thing that one needs to do in an AI system is train it. Now, when it comes to, for example, the video I was showing earlier, you would need to train it by providing a large amount, what we call a data set, of different faces, so that the system starts recognizing what is a human face and what is not. In case of LLMs, or generative AI, which are text-based, they are trained by providing large amounts of textual data sets. In the case of ChatGPT, this was done by data which is available on the internet. So basically, they scraped the internet, they provided books, papers, websites, Wikipedia, anything which is available as a website, and they fed it into this special AI model, which was called an LLM. Through this feeding of data, the system starts learning grammar, facts, and also some reasoning ability. And this is done by training the data into this system. Humans are involved in this phase because the humans decide what data set to use for training. So they would choose what data to use to train the system and what not. So there's a filtering system. And they also have oversight on the way the data is cleaned and pre-processed to remove noise. So data is prepared through a human person. How does the training occur? Now here I'm going to keep it a bit simple, but really what happens is that when you feed data into this LLM, in the form of sentences. The sentences are broken down into smaller units, which are called tokens. Tokens might actually mean words, but more often than not, it might also be a sub-word. Like, for example, if we use the word unhappy, that's broken into two tokens, the un part and the happy part, because the un part is used for other words as well. So the system automatically, once you're feeding in sentences, it's breaking down in this sentence into a number of different tokens. Then the LLM looks at the tokens and sees the relationships between them to make this particular sentence. So tokens start building relations between them. And there is also self-attention given to these words. So, for example, words in a sentence for a particular topic, they're marked as being together only if the sentence contains a particular other word for that particular topic. When it comes to learning, it also takes into consideration some positional encoding, so the position of the word in the sentence. So what I'm pointing out here is that although we're feeding it with data, for the LLM, the words don't have the meaning that they have for us humans. They're actually just text. They're numbers, they're changed into vectors. But it looks at the relationship between the different words and how they are found next to each other given the positionality in particular sentences. This training is quite costly, so it's not done all the time. So training an LLM is done on regular intervals, not continuously. Once the LLM is trained, it is ready for querying or asking it questions. Now, when it comes to asking questions from an LLM, what happens is this: you would ask it something like you'd write a question on ChatGPT and you say something like, "What is a tidy thing to eat pasta with?" The LLM would actually rearrange the words to do something like a tidy thing to eat pasta with is, and now at this point, it looks at the map, at this cloud, which was built during training. And it looks at situations where thing, pasta, eat are next to each other. But it doesn't just do that. It will also look at tidy. And it says, okay, tidy is also, in another phase, another word for utility, tool. So with, when you consider the concept of utility, tools, with might actually mean using, by means of. So it takes these two in conjunction when looking at the next word. This is interesting because if you look at the next question, what is a nice thing to eat pasta with? It again changes the order. But even though most of the words are the same, this time the with meaning is taken to be accompanied by. Why? Because there's nice. And nice actually means taste, flavored. So when there's taste, flavored in conjunction with, it's usually accompanied by. These are used together to figure out the next word. So a nice thing to eat pasta with would be pesto, for example. And a tidy thing to eat pasta with might be a fork. Okay, so here we're looking at a utility, at a tool. That's how an LLM arrives to identify the next word. So in reality, this LLM, this generative AI, is guessing the next word. And that is how the algorithm behind these large language model works. Why is all this important? You might be saying, why are you bothering with all this? We're not going to program an LLM, so why are you explaining all this? Well, this is important because through this, we can understand some limitations that LLM have, and which we have to keep in mind when we're using these kind of tools. Now, these limitations are, as we go along, improving. I mean, some of them are being even removed, but some of them will remain there, as I'll explain. So limitations are in the following realms. One of them is accuracy. an LLM is as accurate as the data it was used, as the data used to train it with. Now, since ChatGPT, for example, it was internet data which was used to train ChatGPT, the LLM might actually replicate the same data which is found on the internet, which might not be 100% factual. There is what we call discrimination and bias. For example, when ChatGPT 3.5 came out, you could actually query it with a large number of different languages. You could ask it questions in English and it would reply in English. You could ask it questions in Italian, Austrian, whatever. You could use Maltese as well. But since the number of documents on the internet written in Maltese is quite small, the errors it used to do in Maltese was quite large because it didn't have enough data to train it with. Now, this has been drastically improved in the newer versions of ChatGPT, like the one which was launched just last week, the ChatGPT 4.0, which I'll delve a bit into as well later. Currency is another limitation. As I said, when it comes to training LLMs, training is very costly, so it's not done all the time. Now, if you look at ChatGPT 3.5, the data was frozen on up to November 2022 initially, and then moved to 2023. So if you ask it for a historical fact, which occurred after it was trained, it will give you the wrong answer. So, for example, here in Malta, we had a change of president. And if you ask ChatGPT 3.5 about who's the current president in Malta, it will give you the old president and not the new one. It's simply because it was not trained with the latest information. If you ask ChatGPT 4 with the same question, you'll get the right answer because it was trained at a later date. There are issues as well with privacy. When we send data to generative AI systems, the generative AI system will store that data in a log file. Now, as I'll be showing, we can stop that from occurring, but if you don't, and you stick to the original configuration, well, that data is stored somewhere where we don't have visibility of where, and it can also be used to train the engine at a later point in time. So we have to really be wary of this, what kind of data we use to query these kind of systems. And when it comes to, for example, supplying student data, we should actually avoid supplying that kind of data because of privacy concerns. Finally, another limitation is the incorrect citations or references. This is important, especially because we're treating this from the educational point of view. So if you ask ChatGPT or other large language models to provide you with some academic writing, it will. You can also ask it to provide references, and it will again. But depending on the tool that you're using, if it doesn't find a reference, it will just invent one. It will, what we call, hallucinate. It will create and invent these references. So it's very important that you check whatever the system gives you. Now, again, this is improving. If you look at ChatGPT 4.5 or 4.0, there's been major improvements there. If you look at Gemini or other Perplexity or other tools which are similar in nature, but by different vendors, they normally do a better job at that. But it's always important to check the output of these systems. So when we talk about JetGPT, which is one of the most popular large language models, there are a number of systems around. 3.5 is the free version that's available for anyone. Just create an account and you can start using it. But the data was frozen up to November 2022. Then there's ChatGPT Plus, which is ChatGPT 4. You have to pay about $20 per month to use that. It provides a better, speedier system. with more accurate data. Also, a marked difference from ChatGPT Plus to 3.5 is that the ChatGPT Plus allows us to use what we call plugins. So with ChatGPT 4, there are a number of plugins, like, for example, text to speech or speech to text. So it would allow us to talk to the LLM, and it would actually take our text, our speech as a command to be used by the large language model. Just last week, we had ChatGPT 4.0, which was released. ChatGPT 4.0 was a landmark release as well, because now it can actually take text, speech, and video, not through plugins, but directly. So this means that ChatGPT 4.0 can now also create video as well as speech and mimic the human speech as well. It also provides real-time responsiveness, so it is quite fast, because under ChatGPT Plus, there were systems which were translating the text to speech, but there was a lag. With ChatGPT 4.0, that lag now has been removed. It's quite responsive. Interesting to point out that ChatGPT 4.0 is available for everyone, so it's available for free, not like ChatGPT 4, which was you had to pay $20 per month. The difference is that with ChatGPT 4.0, you get a time window, so you can use it only for some minutes for free, and then it switches you back to 3.5. There are loads of tools out there which use the same technology underneath. For example, there's Microsoft Copilot, which is very similar to ChatGPT. There's Google Gemini, which used to be called Google Bard, changed. And then there's Perplexity. These three are LLMs, right? So they work on text-based as well. There's Claude, which is also by another vendor. But you could think of these as cousins, they have the same method of working. Then there are other tools like DALL-E, there's DALL-E 3, which is a generative AI tool to create images. Something like it is Midjourney, okay, and there are other tools, like, for example, a tool which I like using for research purposes is called Research Rabbit. This tool, you can actually supply it with papers, and it will automatically find other papers which are very similar to that, and also create a network of how these papers link together, something which I find quite useful if I'm doing a literature review, for example. I'll quickly describe a bit the way the interface of ChatGPT. You can browse to ChatGPT from the URL chat.openai.com. Once you do so, if you have an account, it will simply display this. Otherwise, you'll need to sign up for an account, which is free. And if you have a Google account, it's simply a matter of saying, use my Google account. Once you log in, you're presented with the screen, and at the bottom is the place where you can actually type your prompt. A prompt is a sentence for now. Let's keep it something like that. It's the question I can ask ChatGPT. On the left-hand side, I actually have a history. So all the chats I create are listed on the left-hand side of the screen. And on the top right corner, there's the user settings. Now I'll explain a bit deep further by actually showing you my ChatGPT version. Is everyone okay up to here? Are there any questions you'd like to ask? Okay. Okay, so feel free. Okay, I'm not seeing everyone, so feel free to stop me at any point if there are any questions. So I'll just stop the presentation for now, and I'll switch to my ChatGPT interface. Okay. Okay. Okay, so you should be seeing my ChatGPT screen here. As I
Yes.
mentioned earlier, this is the place where you would type your prompts, okay? Um, and on this side, that's where I will get my history. Let me just move the Zoom interface out of the way, okay? On the top right corner, I'll start from here. It's my user account. And from here, what is interesting is the settings place. I'll go into that. Um, we'll look things, my preferred language, it automatically detects, so I can type in Italian and it will automatically detect that I'm typing in Italian and it will reply in Italian, or I can use English or whatever. Um, it's important, improve the model for everyone. And by default, it is on. What does this mean? This means that all the data I will supply to ChatGPT will be taken by ChatGPT, stored, and used to train the system in the future. Now, what repercussions does this have? If I'm using ChatGPT to store, say, um, some data which I'm using for analysis, if I leave this on, it means that that data will actually one day end up in the ChatGPT system, in that huge cloud which I showed initially. Okay. So this is something that you have to watch out for. So if you're putting in confidential information, which I would suggest you don't, but if you do, then switch this off. Okay. So it's a matter of clicking on this on and switching it to off. And that would mean that the data is not used, you're marking it as not used to train ChatGPT. You can export data, you can delete your account. There is multi-factor authentication, so that when you log in, you don't just log in using a username and a password. Okay? And I can also use it to delete all chats. Okay, so these are all the things that I can do from the settings section. Since I did not ask it to delete, uh, to not stop sending data to ChatGPT, if I type a question here, like for example, what is economics, to keep it simple, it's my prompt, and then immediately it starts writing out the answer. And as you can see on the left-hand side, we now have an economic models and theories. So the history started to be populated. I find it quite useful at times to share this particular session. So from here, I can simply click on share, and it will give me a URL which I can share with people I'm collaborating with or with my students, okay? And they can actually see the discussion I'm having with ChatGPT. This is a session, so it will keep remembering what I prompted. So my first prompt was, what is economics? Now, I might want to say, explain this to a 10-year-old. And the language it will start to use now is something which a 10-year-old would be able to understand. This is something I find useful as an educator, because if there's someone who might have problems with language, for example, or I'm in a school and I want to explain something to an audience, I might actually use ChatGPT to help me customize the language, the answer, to specific groups. I can also ask it to change the language. I asked it to change it to Italian, and immediately I'm getting the answer. So I find it quite a cool tool, you know. I can also ask it to summarize stuff. So summarize in a 2-paragraph. I'm purposely doing in spelling mistakes, and as you can see, it just simply understands that. It kept using Italian, but it still switched to 2 paragraphs because I used Italian before. So I can say, change this to British English. And the reply you get is pretty immediate. Okay? That's the cool thing about these large language models. They provide very fast reply, and you can use it to customize to a particular audience as well, something which is quite useful for educators. What I'd like to do now is expand a bit the concept of prompts. In this example, which I've just shown you, I used very, very simple prompts. Change this to British English. Summarize this in 2 paragraphs. What is economics, right? Explain this to a 10-year-old. That is a prompt. But depending on the structure of the prompt, the answer provided will fit the bill a bit more. So it all depends on how detailed our prompt is. Excuse me. So let me delve a bit more now into prompting. Prompting is becoming quite important. In fact, there are now also people employed as what we call prompt engineers. Their task is actually to write the right prompts for large language models to operate.
Leonard,
Yes,
there is
yes,
a question. There is a question
yes,
in
of
the chat
course.
by Ivanka about ChatGPT on mobile app.
Yes. Can you reply can you ask me the question, or should I'll just find it on chat. 1 second.
Ivanka, can you tell it?
Yes, sorry, I was looking for the unmute button. No, basically I was wondering because the app is still, I think it's still on 3.5 as a version. So I was wondering if they would actually give us the 4.0 on the app.
Well,
because it's quite different.
It is.
The experience is a bit different.
Yeah, I can tell you what happened on the web. What they did on the web is that automatically they switch you to Chat GPT 4.0, and you'll notice that because you start seeing the paperclip at the bottom, which wasn't available in 3.5. In 3.5. But then after some time, they just switch you back to 3.5. I'm not sure about the app. To be honest, I use mostly the browser. I don't know if there's an update for the app. I haven't checked that. Maybe I'll try it during an exercise and I'll get back to you about that. Okay. There are also loads of other tools, for example.
Oh, you're welcome. Meanwhile, thank you, because the session is really, really informative. And I've been to a few other sessions before, and the way you're going through it, like it's like really giving me a better understanding. So, like, thank you.
That's good. That's good to hear. And obviously, if you have any questions, feel free. I can elaborate a bit more. I'm trying to keep it simple, basically, because obviously some things are a bit more complex than the way I'm explaining them, you know. Right. I'll just switch back to, yep. Yes.
Leonard, there is another question from Maria.
Of course. Okay.
Hi, Leonard. I have a quick question.
Yes.
I have a subscription, so when I use the app, it is reverting to 4.0. On my app, I am getting 4.0. The thing is
Yes.
now,
Okay.
what is the difference? Is the paid version also updated to the May 13th update that the 4.0 is using?
Yes. Yes. The difference is, so the free version and the paid version are both using 4.0. Now, the difference is that in the free version, you only get a small time window. So I don't know what the time window is, but let's say it's 30 minutes. After 30 minutes, you switch to 3.5, and you're told you can use 4.0 again in 10 hours. With the paid version, the time window is much larger. Okay? But even that is not, so you can't just keep using 4.0 all the time, because you do run out of time as well. And again, it tells you you've used all your credits for today. You switched back to 4 or 3.5, depending on which one you've used. And then you can use it again in so many hours. This happens to me because I use it also for research purposes. And at times you're working with documents, and you get to a point where you'll notice that it's coffee time. You know, you have to move away from your PC because you've used all your credits, and you have to wait some more to use it again. Okay,
Thank you.
so the difference is that you'll get a larger window for the
Okay.
$20 you spend every month.
Thank you.
Okay. Not sure if there are other questions, Manuel.
Not that I am aware of, no.
Okay. If you could actually help me a bit, and if there are other questions, just interrupt me and I'll answer them. Okay.
Thank you, yes.
All right. So let me go back to my presentation. So, right. Prompting. What is important in prompting? Provide as much information as possible. So provide the topic. Provide the target audience. Who do you want the answer? Who's going to use your answer? Is it going to be used by school children? Is it first-year graduates? Are they experts? Are they parents? So specify who the audience is. Any background, any format. You can actually say things like, for example, do it in just 2 paragraphs, do it in 400 words. Now, it won't stick to the 400, but it will try to get close to it. Okay? So the more information you can provide, the better the answer will be. Another important thing about prompts is the experimentation. As I showed in the small example I showed earlier, when you're typing a prompt, you can follow up. There is something called the session awareness. It will keep remembering all the questions you've asked in that particular session. The moment you move to a different session, it will start afresh. It's a tabula rasa. It will wipe the whiteboard clean. Okay, but in that session, it keeps remembering. So it's important to follow up. If the output isn't what you were asking for, ask it to change it, and keep doing so until you arrive to the output that you really require. So you might need a few prompts to get to your answer, follow-up questions, give it further details, but stay in the same chat window so that keeps remembering the questions you had before. Like that, it's building context and data. Chat history, I find it quite useful because it keeps a track of all my chats which I've conducted before. As I showed also in the demo, I tend to find it useful also to share it with my students or with my colleagues when required. This is an important thing. ChatGPT, I consider it to be a very useful assistant, but it's not the end result. We have to use it as a starting point. But I find it quite useful as an educator. I use it for brainstorming, for example. Give me 10 multiple choice questions on this particular topic. And then from those 10, I'll choose 5. Or maybe I'll choose 8 and deduct 2 of them and change them a bit. You know, I'm in charge at the end. I know my students, not ChatGPT. But it's useful because before I might have spent 2 hours coming up with a number of questions, and now the time spent is much less, significantly less. Time which I can spend doing more productive stuff. So it's a starting point. I would compare it to brainstorming or a rough draft. Okay, you can use AI at the basis of your ideas and then improve. Improve on that. Use your professional judgment. I've hinted at this. In education, you're the expert, not ChatGPT. So you have to choose your judgment on what to expect and what not. Always remember the limitations which I've mentioned earlier, especially the hallucination part. When something is not known by ChatGPT, it will invent it. Things are improving with newer models, but the chances are still there. So it's always, you have to always check that the answer it gave you actually makes sense. This also I consider to be very important, the protection of student privacy. I cannot stress this enough. It's very, very important to protect privacy because remember that data could be used to train the model in future. Data, even if you say don't train the model, data still saved in the log files for 30 days, right? And that log file might get hacked. I'm not saying that they don't have the right security in place, but you never know what happens. So it might actually fall into the hands of people that you don't want it to fall in. So never share personally identify information, sensitive data. Don't include those in your prompts. Okay? If you're going to use names of students, change them to something else and then change them in the answer. You have tried to keep the points to a minimum, but these are the absolute minimum when it comes to prompting. Now, rather than keeping this as a lecture of sorts, I'd like to also provide some practice hands-on. So what I've done is I've compiled a series of prompts, which I'll just show you now, but they're available through this QR code or through this link. This is a Google document. You're free to actually open ChatGPT, copy any of these prompts, modify it, and try out the answer. But before you do that, I'll just show it on my screen just to give you a brief run through on the different prompts which I've created there. I'll also put the URL in the chat. So I'm just sharing the document. So these are some prompts, right, which you might find useful in your work. So for example, the first one, you are as an experienced university lecturer. So here I'm providing the role which I'd like ChatGPT to take. skilled in universal design for learning, design an accessible 1-hour lecture plan about a topic. I can choose a topic in business education for first-year students enrolled in a business education course. The lecture plan should include a hands-on activity and frequent opportunities for collaboration. Please format the response in a table, ensuring the lecture accommodates diverse learning styles and promotes an engagement through interactive elements. So note here the amount of background I'm providing to ChatGPT. The more background I provide, the better results it will give me. I'm just trying this out just to show you how it works. So I'll just copy this, go into ChatGPT, start a new chat, and pasting. Okay. You should be seeing my ChatGPT window, right?
Yes, we are.
Okay, so there you go. It gave me a lesson plan in this case, right? In a table format with the timing and all. Okay. With strategies I can adopt, think, pair, share, as well as group activities about marketing. There's also a quiz. Okay, so that's all because the prompt I used was very specific. Now, if you tried the same prompt, you'll get a different answer because LLMs always produce different answers. Okay, but these kind of prompts are quite useful. Now, like them, there are others. So I'll just give you some time to experiment. And obviously, I'm here if you have any questions. You can ask, and if required, I might ask you to share your screen if it's something that would need to see the output provided by ChatGPT. Okay, so I'll allocate about 10 minutes for that. Okay. You can also type on chat. I'll be monitoring chat as well in this 10 minutes.
Leonard, kindly share again
Yes.
the link to the document, please, in the chat.
Yes, of course, of course. Yes, 1 second. So it's http://tiny.cc/prompts. I'm seeing people coming in, so it should be working now.
Professor, as people are coming in, this is Tamara. I had placed into the chat, if you would be so kind, obviously your choice, to share all of these files. When I upload the video from today's presentation to our Global Exchange, I can put links to the actual files there as well, because this has been very interesting and the prompts are very critical. I use ChatGPT 4 for my accreditation purposes in my job. And I trained the system to know what a good societal impact statement was. And then I put in our criteria and it gave me a complete societal impact statement and about 15 key performance indicators that we can use. Took me about an hour, where had we done this via committee, it would have taken at least 6 months. So ChatGPT can make you much more efficient in your work if you use it properly. So I appreciate
Yes,
what
I
you're
agree.
saying.
Yeah, I agree 100% that it all depends on the prompting. The prompting is a very, very important skill.
Right. And learning how to train ChatGPT was a huge help. So that prompt engineering piece of it is a critical component of
Yes.
using it effectively. So I appreciate what you're showing.
As I said, it's also a matter of trying things and improving on the data that you give it. Okay. So here in this list, there are quite a number of examples. For example, things about learning outcomes, which you might find useful too. Yeah, this I use as well in my study units. Sometimes you need to put up a unit wrap-up note, and just type it in and it gives you something you can adapt. Things like list of definitions, multiple choice questions. I find useful as well. I'll just give you time to try them out.
From my student teachers also, I noted that it helps to improve the pedagogy.
Yeah.
For example, one student teacher had to teach the functions of commercial banks. And I think it emerged from ChatGPT. She used the idea of bus stop. She developed stations across the classroom, and she divided the class in groups, and each group went to learn about a particular function.
This is very.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, Manuel. It's Alex. I'll speak after. Sorry.
It's a variation of the jigsaw cooperative technique, but ChatGPT just facilitated this emerging of a pedagogical approach.
Yeah. And for someone who's a novice, that is a very, very important skill, because probably it would have taken her quite some time to get to something similar. So there, ChatGPT acted as a good assistant, and I'll pick on this when it comes to the assessment part. So I'll refer to your example, Manuel, when it comes to the assessment.
Thank you. We remind it all, the bus stop approach.
Yeah. As Maria is also saying in the chat, you can also use it, with prompts to help you grade student work. Again, here I want to stress the importance of obviously checking the work, because obviously we're talking about an IT system and it can fail too. Okay, what I propose doing, because it's already we're already an hour into, and I'd like to have some time to discuss also assessment, because I think that is quite important. So I'm moving on. Obviously, I can share this prompt file, and you can experiment also after this unit too, after this presentation too. So the next part of the presentation I'll devote to the concept of assessment in the times of Gen AI. I mean, when ChatGPT hit the news back in November 2022, the initial reactions from the education field was, let's ban it. Okay, this will create havoc in our universities, in our schools. Let's not use it. Even at my university, there were quite a number of people who were quite adamant about stopping ChatGPT from being used at university. Now, if we reflect a bit about this is nothing new. Socrates, back in 469 BCE, was concerned about writing, because the argument was that if we teach people how to write, they will become more forgetful, because they will rely more on the things that they wrote, and so their memory wouldn't be as sharp as it was when they weren't writing things down. I wonder what would have happened had he got his way. In the 1980s, there was the ban the calculator movement. Okay, I was at school at the time, and I remember having to use the fourth figured tables, and it was a blue book where if you want to find the tangent or cosine of a number, you'd have to use a ruler on this book to identify where the number is. What skill does that give you, really? A calculator can do that much quicker, and you can work on other interesting stuff in the meantime. So this reaction is quite normal to whenever there's something new. However, we have to also reflect on what assessment modalities are at risk. And I think one of the main ones which is at risk is the essays. You know, in tertiary education, for example, we rely a lot on assigning our students assignments or essays, where we give them a title and we ask them to create an essay, a piece of research about that tool. But with tools like ChatGPT, it is relatively easy to get help in writing these essays. Now, writing the essay or creating a skeleton or brainstorming, I see no problems with that. The problem I see with is taking chunks of data produced by tools like ChatGPT and passing those on as if it's the work of the student. So with essays are very vulnerable to tools like ChatGPT. A quick note here about plagiarism detection tools. In my university, we use a plagiarism detection tool, but in reality, no such tool works. There are tools which, like for example, GPT-0, which claims to detect if text was written by a GPT or not, but in reality, they provide a lot of false positives. So most of the universities are switching those off. Even if they give you a score, you cannot really use that as proof that the data was created using LLMs. So plagiarism detection tools were left basically with no help on GPT tools. Other popular assessment tools are lab reports, but then again, these two are susceptible to GPT, because with GenAI, you can actually also now upload CSV files or PDFs and ask the ChatGPT or other LLMs to analyze the data from the file. ChatGPT can give you also code written in R or Python to create charts. If you're using the paid version, it will actually create the chart for you. So even lab reports, they are susceptible as well to issues with GenAI. Another type of assignment we assign to our students are paper critiques, where you give them a paper and you ask them to criticize that. Again, there are GenAI tools. ChatGPT 4o is one of them, for example, where you can upload a PDF and ask the GPT to give you a summary in point form. or ask the GPT to compare and contrast two papers. So here again, although you're assessing the work of the student, it could actually be the work of the ChatGPT.
We have a question on a different note.
Yes. Yes.
Can you see it in the chat?
No, Manuel, if you can.
I fed ChatGPT my prompt, but it is taking already 4 minutes to prepare the material. Does it usually take this long, please?
No, normally it doesn't. Now, it could be that you're using the free version and your prompt is going over the allotted free credits. That happened to me once. So if you refresh, it might actually start afresh, but switch you to 3.5. So it's a matter of trying it out. Just refresh the page if that keeps happening.
I'm getting an error that the app is extremely busy right now. So that may be part of the problem too.
That might be an issue too. That might be an issue too. Remember with the free version, to be honest, it used to occur much more frequently when ChatGPT was launched. Because even with the paid version, you'd start using it and it tells you there are too many people on it, you'll have to wait. They keep adding resources to it, but that's something which happens, that there are too many people on and you'll just have to wait your turn. With the paid version, you're bumped up the queue, but there's no guarantee really.
We have a question from Elizabeth Leonard.
Yes.
Hello. I really have a question. How do you handle it that as there were some comments in the chat that you say, okay, it helps you grading texts from or papers, writings from students, because actually, at least in our legal situation, it's not allowed to upload text from students as it's their right on their own text. And I could upload my own text, but I cannot upload your text. Either it is published, but not unpublished text. I'm not allowed actually to upload it to ChatGPT. So how do we handle that?
Yeah, I agree. I wouldn't upload, due to privacy concerns, I wouldn't upload the work of students. The comment was done by someone who said that he could use that to grade. I would also have concerns because ChatGPT might also give you false answers, and if I'm using that to depend, on I'm using that to grade someone, and basically his grade would depend on it, I would have issues with that too. So I wouldn't really suggest that you upload the work of students. Now, in some universities, you do have the right to submit the work of students into tools, like, for example, anti-plagiarism systems. This might not cover you to actually to upload it also in LLMs. So I'm not sure if I answered your question, but I wouldn't do it.
Yeah, but you also agree that we are not allowed to upload essays from students to ChatGPT.
At University of Malta, which is the place I work in, no, we are not allowed.
Yeah, we too. And the other question is, with all the tools, I mean, of course, there are these AI detectors, but with the other tools which check more or less if it's I don't know how to pronounce it, a plagiarism, something like that.
Plagiarism.
Because we really have to differ, because this is not plagiarism, it's actually ghostwriting. If I let my text write from ChatGPT, so if ChatGPT writes my text, that's not plagiarism. It's ghostwriting. When I do not state that I used ChatGPT to produce this text. Yeah.
Okay. You're right there.
Yeah.
With plagiarism, detection tools for plagiarism not only detect plagiarism, but they also give you the source. So they would say, this essay, this particular paragraph is copied from, and they give you the paper. or they give you an assignment in another university. So they give you the source where it was copied from. That's what happens in the normal plagiarism. Now, if you put in ChatGPT data there, it probably will bypass plagiarism because ChatGPT it invents the text. Okay, so as you were rightly saying, it's more like ghostwriting rather than plagiarism. Now, some tools claim that they can detect that. In reality, from experience, they don't. Okay, and that's why most of the universities are not relying on it. They're not relying on these kind of systems to detect ChatGPT data.
Mm.
Okay, now, yes, as you were saying before, it's exactly like ghostwriting. It's like hiring someone to write your assignment. That's so what I'm doing right now is actually explaining the different modalities and showing that they're basically all susceptible to problems with ChatGPT or other kinds of LLMs. So I'm going to propose now how we can adapt our assessment, right, in the times of Gen AI. Okay. Another sort of assignment we usually give is a literature review, where we ask students to review a number of papers. There are LLMs like Claude, which is another LLM similar to ChatGPT, where you can upload multiple papers. And you can ask it to synthesize and compare and summarize. So these kind of tools can also be used to create a literature review for you. Presentations or podcasts. You can ask a student to create a presentation. Now, ChatGPT, for example, will not create a presentation, but you can ask it to create a script for a presentation, which you can then just copy, put it into PowerPoint, and you have your presentation. There are tools like Gamma, where you can actually give it a prompt to create a presentation, but these tools might not be exactly 100% useful in a university scenario. Same with podcasts. Even though it might not create the podcast for you, it could create the script for you to create the podcast. So creating a lot of help. The only mode which for now is not susceptible, I stress the word for now, is not susceptible to Gen AI issues is the in-person exam. But as we know, the in-person exam has its own set of problems. Because in-person exams, they focus mostly on exam techniques, time management. They don't really focus on real-world work environments. In fact, we penalize also students who might actually be quite good students, but then they go into exams and they might not perform well because they might actually blank under pressure. So let's hope that we don't move all our assessment to in-person exams. Such exams, they don't really lend themselves to learning outcomes such as communication, critical thinking, teamwork. Okay, we can't really assess those using an exam. So as I've shown, basically all modes of assessment are susceptible to tools like ChatGPT. So here I have to take a step back and consider again, what's education all about? And I think one of the things that education should be about, it's actually developing students who are well-rounded, who can contribute, lead, right? Read effectively in authentic, contemporary environments. And by contemporary, I mean environments which might actually also include AI. Because our graduates, if we talk about tertiary, or our students, if we talk about schools, live in an environment where AI is pervasive, it's everywhere. And if they go into new jobs, they will be asked to use these kind of tools. So if at university or at other schools we ban them from using them, we're actually doing a disservice rather than a service. It's also good to keep in mind at what level we're assessing. And here I'm referring to Bloom's taxonomy, which probably you're familiar with, which at the lower levels, we're looking at remembering stuff and understanding. But in today's world, with tools like ChatGPT, it's very easy to get access to information. So the remembering level, it's very easy to counter, it's very easy to replace. But then the higher levels are more about analyzing, applying, evaluating, creating, which are more, which would require more than a simple LLM. An LLM might help, but the user input would also be required there too. So it depends on what level we're assessing. The higher level we are assessing, the more ChatGPT can be used as a tool, but the user input must be considerable there as well.
We have a question from Ivanka Leonard, please.
Yes. Okay.
Yes, I find this really interesting because I really try to follow the Bloom's taxonomy and making sure that like we're assessing the right things. And I find that with ChatGPT, what I found a problem is that certain higher level learning that usually I use to assess in a certain way, when I put it through ChatGPT, it can produce it. So it caused a bit of problems because like earlier I would give, say, take home assignments and they have access to the internet, but I know that because it's, for example, a case study or a scenario, they're not going to manage to cut and paste. They're going to have to apply. Yeah. But I put that scenario in ChatGPT and it does the work for them. So it's like, unfortunately, I'm finding it really hard to stay away from the exam in-person thing because most of the things...
Give me 5 minutes and I'll reply to this answer. And I'll hopefully also convince you to stay away from the exam. Hopefully.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, all right. So I'll just cover some more slides because, and then I'll discuss this point in particular. So with ChatGPT, we have 3 options. We could avoid AI, and the only way to do that is to go to in-person exams. Now, again, this is a temporary solution. There is already technology today with glasses, for example, where there is technology that can display images on the glass itself. Okay, today it's quite costly, but as we know, with technology, cost is only relative. So it might happen in the future that people might be able to cheat as well and have ChatGPT on their glasses. And that would also make exams susceptible. We can try to outrun them. But outrunning them is very difficult with AI because the rate of change is very fast and it's creating something which is proof, Gen AI proof is very difficult. The other option, which I would advocate in favor of, is to embrace and adapt. Okay? So rather than stopping students from using it, ask them to use it and assess through it. I'll explain how. And this is a possible approach. The possible approach would be to use not one assessment mode, but a number of them, and try to find a balance between what we call assessment of learning and assessment as learning. Okay, now I'll explain the difference. By assessment of learning, here I'm speaking of assessment of specific facts, which might be important for a particular subject you're teaching. Now, in that case, you'll have to go for an exam, or say a viva voce, an interactive oral assessment, okay? A quiz. But you wouldn't give all the marks on this exam. You wouldn't give all the marks to the quiz, okay? And you would do that supervised in class or in a supervised exam. But what do we understand by assessment as learning? What I understand by that is that through the assessment itself, students are learning too. And I have a number of points here, which I'll share in a minute, but I'll just give you an example from my class. As Manuel mentioned, I work in a faculty of education, so students following my classes are generally pre-service educators. And they use ChatGPT a lot, and they also use it to create lesson plans. So rather than asking them not to use ChatGPT, I actually asked them to use ChatGPT to create lesson plans. That was the task. Create a lesson plan using ChatGPT. Create all the resources required for the lesson plan using ChatGPT. But then supply me with the prompt to use, and also supply me with a criticism of the tool, the lesson plan provided by ChatGPT. So there I'm trying to hit at the upper levels of Bloom taxonomy, where the student is actually evaluating the work created by ChatGPT rather than using ChatGPT to just create the work. Okay?
Hi, sorry,
Now,
can I interrupt a second? But like
yes, of
that, you're
course.
assessing their use of AI. You're not assessing, you know what I mean? You're not assessing, you're assessing their digital skills rather
Not
than
only,
other
not only,
skills, I guess.
no, because I'm also assessing by asking them to criticize the lesson plan created. I'm also asking them to
Yeah,
evaluate
true.
it, you see, and
Okay.
tell me their opinion about it. And this worked. I mean, because I used it with, I had over 130 students running through this. And okay, there were students who said, this is spot on. But then if you look at the prompt, they just used one line prompt, you know? Whilst others actually were actually just using the prompt and then adding another prompt to improve the result. And they also said, look, I would use this, but I would adapt it because I have this situation in class, which ChatGPT doesn't know about. So there they're showing me that they're evaluating. So hitting
Yes.
the upper levels
Thank you.
okay. Now, another thing which I could use, going back to your scenario, now, Ivanka, I don't know what level you teach in.
I teach level 4.
Okay, perfect. So another thing which I find useful is, for example, if I'm giving them a scenario, let them use ChatGPT. What's wrong with that? But then I ask them to create a presentation, which I will ask about. I will quiz. Because like that, I'm quizzing them that about their knowledge about it. They could have used ChatGPT, but they've used it in the right way to help them understand the scenario a bit more. But then they would need to be able to present to be able to pass the assessment.
Like present
or
verbally and answer your questions, yes, on the content.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And if you think about it, in schools, we don't train our students a lot on presentation skills, something which is a 21st century skill, which is we should really be pushing for. And if we adopt this kind of approach, we could use ChatGPT as a tool for them to help them, but then they need to present to ensure that they actually have learned what they needed to learn. And this approach is very similar to the flipped classroom approach, which we've been, has been in high regard in education for quite some time, where we actually get students to research, right? And ChatGPT is used to help them with the research, but then they have to present and show us what they have actually learned. So like that, this is assessment as learning. They're learning through the assessment itself. Okay. Now, here I'm actually listing a number of examples, right? But the crux of the idea is actually that the students use AI to generate things, and we ask them to present it, or we ask them to criticize it, and provide us also with the tools they use to create the AI.
Leonard, this has
Yes?
been super interesting, and time is running out. So
Yes, I'm aware of that, but I'm spot on because
if we
that's
can
my last slide.
conclude in 5 minutes, thank you.
No, I'm actually done with the slides. So we can actually, I can spend the next 5 minutes, if you have 5 more minutes, answering any questions from the audience. Does it work, Manuel?
Yes, sure. We appreciate it. Was very, very interesting. And please, if someone,
I'll just,
yes,
yeah.
If someone has comments, reactions, questions.
If I may, I found it very, very, very useful. So I'm really glad I managed to attend. Thank you for the invitation. It was very, very practical, very hands-on, and I had a similar session with some colleagues where I work, and we didn't really manage to come up with any possible ways of working around the situation. And I feel that after this seminar, I want to try out and experiment some of the ways you mentioned. And I totally agree that if it's a tool that they're using, that they can use at the place of work, because I work in vocational education. So if it's a tool that they can use at work, then I don't see why they can't use it in education. So it's, as you said, it's a matter of them learning how to use it wisely. Because at the moment, the problem is that it's cut and paste. So yes, it's gonna take a bit of a shift in the way we a shift in our own pedagogies to see how we can include AI as a tool.
Yeah, I agree with that. And by just ignoring it, it will not make it go away.
Oh, it's not
They'll use it anyway. I mean, they'll use their
everywhere.
parents' account. There are students at university, I know for a fact, they're pitching in and buying a shared account, for example, like they do with Netflix, and they use it a few hours each, for example. So we'll just have to adapt.
Yeah, a lot of academics are spending so much time trying to figure out how to flag AI, but more time needs to be spent on how to use it and incorporate it into your curriculum and your pedagogy and things that you do. But it's not. I think the students are just copy and pasting a lot of stuff right now that they're getting out of AI, and they're not citing it. So that's the challenge to try to make. That's where the creativity on our part has to come in, and how we can have them use it where they're not just cutting and pasting stuff and just make. Because I have discussion forums that are just clips, and AI talks the same way, Leonard. If you use it a lot, like I use it all the time, it keeps on saying the same thing.
Yes, and you recognize that.
The same way. It's so nice to see, and hope this finds you well. It keeps on using the same expressions at the beginning and at the end of in the summary. You can tell right away when it came from ChatGPT. I can, at least, because I've been using it from the very beginning.
But some students also wisen up, and what they do is they actually get the output from ChatGPT. They put it into tools like Quillbot.
Yeah.
Or there's also Humanize.
There's so many different things out there now.
Yeah, and you can't keep track of all of them, really. So it's quite hard. What I find useful, but it depends on the mode, right, is actually to get them to present and to turn it also into a tool for the other students as well. So what I tend to do also is actually create a rubric, an assessment rubric for presentations. And then I ask the other peers to assess too.
Peer evaluations, I've been using that. Yes.
Yeah, because if you don't give them a rubric, they'll actually say, "Oh, it's spot on. No, I will ask no questions. There are no questions," because basically I don't want to give a bad mark to my colleagues, so it doesn't give me a bad mark. But with a rubric, you have to, because you have to grade with that rubric, and it turns into a good exercise like that too. And so it stops them from just copying and pasting from ChatGPT, because they have to present now. I find that there is another problem. I mean, we can keep going on about this till tomorrow, really. I'm quite conscious about time, but there's another problem with the larger classrooms, okay? Because you could do it with a classroom which has a small amount, but if you're going to get everyone to present and you have 120, or a 200 classroom, that's going to be quite challenging too.
Impossible. I don't do classes like that, but yes, I can
Yeah.
see that being pretty impossible or difficult at the very least.
Yeah, very difficult. Okay. I think
Well, thank you so much, Leonard, for sharing this
You're welcome.
expertise.
Welcome. My email is in the PowerPoint slides too, so if anyone wants to get in contact, feel free, right? It's been a pleasure, Manuel. It's been a pleasure.
Even
Thank
for
you
us,
very
Leonard.
much.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Welcome back,
I will,
Jerry.
I will have the video online within the next 2 to 3 days. It's just the raw video. So I don't do any editing for them, but we will have it available. And Professor, when you send me the files, I will upload those as well into our
I'll do that. I'll do.
Thank you very much
Okay.
for your expertise.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you
everyone.
so much.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Welcome. Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.